guys, it's me, Dr. Ree, and in this video we're going to be looking at osteology, or the study of bone. We're going to start with the fundamentals of osteology. Bone is mineralized extracellular matrix. So this mineralized extracellular matrix is usually made up of calcium phosphate in the form of hydroxapate crystals. You don't need to know exactly that for my class. But basically what you have is you have these crystals plus collagen fibers, specifically type 1 collagen fibers, plus this thing called osteonectin. Osteonectin is like the glue that holds the crystals and collagen together. So that's what bone is made out of. Now, when I think of bone, right, we think of something like a long bone or like a give a dog a bone, right? And so here we can kind of see that where we have our long bone. But within this bone, we have many different cells. We're going to just name a few here. Now, in instances for lab, you don't necessarily need to be able to identify these specific cells, but for lecture, you may have to. So the first is osteoprogenitor cells. Osteoprogenitor cells are going to be the baby cells, okay? These are made from mesenchyme. These are the most basic, least specialized type of bone cell. An osteoprogenitor cell will then become an osteoblast. Osteoblast, got a blast, right, from like Jimmy Neutron, is building, right, because Jimmy Neutron built a lot of things. So osteoblasts are going to be bone building. How do they build the bone? Well, they're going to secrete osteoid. An osteoid is uncalcified bone. Okay, so it's not yet crystallized. It's uncalcified. But these osteoblasts are going to secrete it outwardly. And they produce also that osteocalcin, right? The osteonectin was kind of the glue. Osteocalcin binds the calcium and ends up allowing this to be calcified. So the osteoblasts and the osteoid work together to form the new bone. Again, osteoid being uncalcified bone material. ECM stands for extracellular matrix. Now, we also have osteoclasts. Now, osteoclasts are bone-breaking cells. This is what breaks down, because we need to be able to break or have bone, but we also need to break it down. Why? Because bone is where a majority of our calcium lies, and sometimes we need the calcium to flow through our system. And we also need bone to be able to kind of manage. And with osteoclasts is how we are able to form different shapes of bones, because it starts like an ice sculpture, and then we have these clasts that come in and they round it out. And they start to break things down, and then we get to see different shapes of bones. And you're going to see that when we get into the other class, the other information of all the different bones in the body, and you get to kind of see how these kind of work together in that form. So they are the bone breaking. And then we have osteocytes, and this is going to be the one that you're going to actually identify for me on some of the diagrams and in class. Osteocytes are the mature bone cells, and they hide away in what are known as lacunae. So, osteocytes hide away in lacunae, and they are connected. So, our osteocytes is connected, or they're connected. The different lacunae are connected via things called caniculi. Okay. So let's look a little bit closer at kind of the orchestration of this kind of idea, the lacunae, caniculi, and all of this. So if we kind of look at this image here, we call this a Harvation system, or the Harvation system, or you can just think of that this is an osteoid. So, or an osteon, not an osteoid, an osteon. So it is a functional unit of bone, and bone is made up of multiple of these. At least compact bone or cortical bone is made up of multiple of these systems. And so what we see in the system is we have a central canal. The central canal is going to house our blood vessels and our nerves. So we have a central canal, and then we have all of these different, sort of like a tree trunk, right? We have all of these different kind of going around. These are known as lamellae. Lamellae are concentric layers. So if you look here, I have lamella right here. These are concentric layers of that bone tissue, of that calcified extracellular matrix. And in the middle is that Hervasian canal, also known as our central canal. That Hervasian canal or central canal is where our blood supply is. Our BS, our blood supply, our nutrient supply, you could also think about. That's where all the nutrients comes from. And we have within those lamellae, so within that concentric circle, we have these lacunae. So you can see I kind of drew them in pink here. And those are the lacuna that have osteocytes within them. Osteocytes are mature bone cells. They're no longer building or breaking things. They're just chilling in their hidey hole, okay? They're little hermits that are just chilling now because they are all mature. They don't need to grow anymore. Whereas osteoblasts and osteoclasts are breaking down for class and building with blasts. So that's what we see there. And then you can see I kind of drew these dark lines to show the caniculi kind of forming together. Okay, so this is what a Hervasian system or an osteon looks like. Again, this whole thing is an osteon. And two osteons connect to each other through a Volkmann canal. So the Volkmann canal is going to have nutrient supply that goes from one to another. So you could think of it as transverse nutrient supply or blood supply. That's how we have across ways, okay? So it's like different avenues of getting that nutrient supply from one osteon to another osteon. Okay, and that's what you're just seeing in this picture here. Now, if we were to look a little closer at a drawing like this in your take-home assignment, you will see that this is a picture found in that take-home assignment. And if we look here, we can find a few different features. So first, let's identify where we see an osteon. So right here, this whole thing that's sticking up, this is one osteon, okay? Now I have multiple of them. Here's one, here's two, here's three, here's four, right? I have multiple of them, okay? So this is my osteon, and we see in the middle of that central canal, or the Hervasian canal you can think of, is our blood supply, right? So these are our blood vessels. And we can see that there are layers that go around it, okay? So we have our blood vessels that are going through it. We have our osteon that we have here. Now this outside bone that we see here, this bone is cortical bone. Cortical bone is made up of osteons like this. This is another type of bone. This is spongy bone, or trabecular bone is another name for it. And you can see it gets that name because look, it kind of looks like Swiss cheese, right? It has all these air sockets, and those air sockets are for blood vessels to kind of roam in and out, and it's also where bone marrow is made, is within this spongy bone material. So if you kind of look up here, the types of bone, 80% of our bone is cortical bone, 20% is trabecular or spongy bone. So this is also known as compact bone. This is also known as spongy bone. Okay, so I have my central canal. Within my osteon, I have all these lamella. So these layers are my different lamella. I will have within those, I will also find, if we kind of look closer, right? So we have our layers, our lamella. Here are my blood vessels. BV for blood vessels. Here I have my osteocyte within my lacuna. And then I see that they're connecting. See these projections right here? Let me do it in a different color. These projections right here, they are connecting through caniculi. So that's what we're seeing here. Those are the different markers that make up this this system, right? This whole thing is an osteon. And then of course we see that there are different layers. So we have different tissues that will line the different areas for each of them. So now if I were to look, and I have like a little tiny picture here, but I want to draw a bigger version of this. Okay, so let's just kind of look at the parts that make up a bone that you kind of need to be responsible for. So if I were to take this and I were to break it down and look at it as if I was drawing a bone here for you. Okay, the first part of like a standard cartoon bone is we have this part right here, right? This part of the bone is known as the epiphysis. The epiphysis is the end or the cap of the bone. And then we have this area that when we're children is still cartilage tissue, but as we grow older, it is calcified. And this is known as our epiphyseal plate or our growth plate. We have our metaphysis, which is kind of the in-between phase between our epiphysis and our diaphysis. So there's the metaphysis, and then we have our long diaphysis. And then we do that whole thing again. Metaphysis, growth plate, and then epiphysis. I made that growth plate like not the right size. Okay. So that's kind of what we're looking at here, okay? So those are the different parts. Now, sometimes on our bone, we also have these things called apophyses. Apophyses are little outcrops that we have in them. So if you think of like the humerus, we're going to have a couple of tubercles or tuberosities, and those are going to be apophyses. So an apophyse are these like outgrowths that are not at the end caps. Okay, so this is apophysis, apophysis. Okay, these are normal outgrowths. And that will form things that we'll name later, like tubercles and tuberosities. Now, if I were to take a cross section of this, so say I was going to just like cut a little hole right in there, okay? I were to take a cross section of this and take a look at it, okay? So I cut a hole right down the middle. I chainsawed it. We're going to have a few different layers. So mind that my circles are not perfect. So here we are micro, right? We're looking at each osteon, really small. Here we're looking at the bone itself. Okay. So the very outside layer. This layer right here. This is our periosteum. Periosteum is that protective outside layer. The periosteum is connected to our compact bone via Sharpay fibers. So you can, like, if I were to draw little fibers that are like, right, and they're going all the way around, those are Sharpay fibers. Okay, and they link the periosteum to the bone. You first see in a long bone, So our first bone that we see is right here. This is all compact bone. All of this is compact bone. Compact bone is going to be the bone that is made up of those Harvasian systems that are going to have a bunch of different osteons or Harvasian systems. This is compact bone, which has those microscopic things that we saw. Then what we have is we have in the middle bone marrow. And bone marrow is stored in spongy bone or trabecular bone. Okay, and so that's what's in this area. We're going to make it look a little spongy. There's my spongy bone. And we're going to have bone marrow in here. Okay, so I'm kind of making the bone marrow. This area is known as the area where I have all this bone marrow, this area is known as the medullary cavity. It's a center area where we have spongy bone that has bone marrow in it. And that medullary cavity is going to be lined, you can see I'm lining it in blue, with endosteum. That's a connective tissue that lines the medullary cavity. Okay, and again, trabecular or sponging bone is going to be within this. Okay, so now if we took that, kind of my drawing that I did here, let's look at this picture up here that I already have written off. So here we have our epiphysis, our cap. Here's that epiphyseal plate or our growth plate, the metaphysis and the diaphysis. And when we cut this open, the trabecular bone is going to be right in here. And here we see, so when we cut that open, here we see the outside is the periosteum. We have the Charpet fibers that are connecting the periosteum to the compact bone. And then the compact bone inside is going to have spongy bone or trabecular that has that bone marrow with a lining of endosteum, which you see in blue here. So those are the fundamentals of bones. In our next video, we're going to be looking specifically at the bones of the axial skeleton and looking at specific markers and things that you need to be able to identify on the bones. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you in the next video.
This video is for educational purposes only, and the information provided is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If you have any questions, please email me or come to Open Lab Thursdays 5 to 8 p.m.